Hello and welcome back to the Keeping Up with the Clann podcast, part two of the Ronan McAlinden interview. The reason for it was the dodgy internet of where I live. So we're back tonight to Ronan. So we're going to start off with the next point that we had on our thing was, Ronan, you were in Armagh for a good while in America, and then you decided to change counties over to County Down. But you sort of had an affiliation with Down also because of your uncle. Sean Smith, who managed Down for years in the 70s and 80s, and also was with Bransford, Hilltown, and Island. So you knew Down quite well.
Yeah, that's correct, Hog. An uncle, Sean Smith, he actually passed away in February 2020. He's my mother's brother, and he was a primary school principal in Bransford. And as you said there, he would have been very, very successful at club level in Down, and then would have had 2 stints managing Down senior teams. So sort of going back originally, I think he started off with Bransford, 1969, 1970, won 2 Ulster titles with Bransford, and then that 1970 year progressed then into the All-Ireland final in 1971 at club level. I think that might have actually been the first All-Ireland club final. I'm not 100% certain on that. And I think in the final they were beaten by UCD, University College Dublin. And then, as you said, it wasn't actually until I sort of read some of the tributes in the Irish news over the last year. I wasn't actually aware until I'd read those newspaper articles that he had also won a senior championship with Clonduff and also won a senior championship with Island. So in terms of my own knowledge of Uncle Sean, that only really came about over the last few months. And then, as you say, 2 stints with Down senior team. I think it was from 74 to 76. I think there was 2 Ulster finals in that. I think one went to a replay maybe against Donegal, and they were beaten in a replay. And then the second stint was in the mid 80s, 84 to 86. Again, 86 culminated in an Ulster final against Tyrone, who went on to get beaten by Kerry that year in the All-Ireland final. So sort of Uncle Sean was probably just there just before the glory days as such of the early 90s with Pete McGrath. So he probably, likes of Ross Ciarán and Mickey Linton and people like that, I think my Uncle Sean probably would have been the manager who maybe sort of brought them in as 19, 20-year-olds into the Down panel, you know?
Yeah, well, I was reading up and I seen that he wasn't just a good manager, he was a good player because he had a minor All-Ireland winner, a minor All-Ireland medal with Armagh in 1949. Like you say, he went on and was in the Ulster finals with Down in 74, 75 and 86. And again, when you're sort of just touching on the players, I was reading up and I seen that Ross Carr, he had described him as a coach before his time, and a lot of them had referred to him as the master as well. So from reading that, they sort of said that whenever he gave his team talk, it was a good and clear plan, and you just felt that you could go out and beat anyone. And he did hone on and sort of focus on the basic skills of the game. And I think actually one of them quoted was the 3D. So it was discipline, dedication, and determination. So I think you probably get quite a lot of those skills from him as well, just from watching you over the past year, Ronan. Like you do focus a lot on the basics, which obviously was key to Sean's success as well.
Yeah, that's true. You sort of mentioned the master there. I think in terms of that name for Uncle Sean, it came from his 2 Ulster titles with Bransford, because he was actually, as I mentioned earlier, he was school principal down in Bransford, and practically that whole Bransford team from 69-70, Sean would have actually been their teacher and their principal in primary school. So it was just sort of that respect, obviously, from primary school that those players had brought through to their adult years, you know, in terms of referring to him as a master. And as I said, Uncle Sean passed away in February 2020, and I remember being up at the hospital in Downpatrick, and 2 or 3 of the Bransford players who religiously had taken Sean out every Christmas or every New Year for dinner, you know, just sort of as a mark of respect, have actually called up to see him in the hospital. And I think the captain of that team was a man called Oliver Burns. And then you also had Colin McAlarney from Leitrim was up that night in the hospital a couple of times whenever I was up. And even still then, like, it was strange for me sitting there watching this, like grown men in their probably 60s, mid to late 60s that stage, still, whenever they were speaking to Uncle Sean on his deathbed, still calling him the master, you know. So
Yeah.
obviously, as you say, there was a lot of respect from his players, not just as a coach, not just as a manager, but obviously as a person too, you know. And I've always sort of thought to myself, you know, where have I got the interest for Gaelic games in? Because my own father would have been at the Ireland finals. You know, Armagh would have been the 53 final, the 77 final, and the 02 final with Armagh. So he would have had an interest in Gaelic, but in terms of the Ciarán club here in Portadown as such, he wouldn't have really had a massive impact on it. I think he was maybe a committee member, maybe for like 1 or 2 years in the 80s. But my father was more interested in like Irish history and historical societies. You know, he was in a historical society in Armagh, the Sean Hussar Dwaha and Donegal and Clogher. So maybe the link sort of in terms of Gaelic for me sort of inadvertently probably came from Uncle Sean. You know, just sort of maybe like childhood experiences of being around him and hearing him talking about football, you know. But certainly, like even there in the last couple of years, like he was well into his 80s. And anytime he spoke to me about football or he was giving me a few tips about management or training drills or games that you could use in trainings, like in his 80s, he still had great passion, and in his 80s he was still able to captivate my attention whenever he spoke, you know. So I could just imagine what he was like whenever he was in his prime. Like I think I actually read in one of those articles, 1969, at first Ulster title with Bransford, he was actually only 38 years of age. He had only actually recently retired from playing. I think whenever he got married then and moved down to Bransford or Glass direction, I think he played for a junior team there called Dunsford, which is, I think that's the name of the parish in our Glass where his wife was from, my Auntie Mary, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And he was well known around the university as well, Roland. He took Jordanstown for about 13 years or so and around
yeah, that's correct. So like whenever I was sort of teenagers, mid-20s at university, Sean would have been heavily involved with Jordanstown, or probably whenever he was involved, it was called the Poly, or the Polytechnic. That's how the team was referred to. And as you say, I'm not 100% certain whether he actually managed or coached the Sigerson team at any stage there, but certainly he would always have managed, you know, for a long number of years, would always have managed the freshers team in Jordanstown. I think I was chatting to a cousin of mine there over Christmas, and I think his record with the Poly was that they played in 8 All-Ireland finals whenever he was manager, and I think they actually won all 8 of them. You know, so he's, again, with the universities, with the club, and obviously with the county, he had tremendous success, you know.
Yeah, and I know the first part we had sort of the part 1 of the podcast would finished up with you doing the league and championship double with St. Peter's. So you 2019, just so we don't miss out on it, you continued on with the Peters, and they stayed up after getting them up
they stayed up in Division 1. Yes, correct. So 2019, Brad, stayed with St. Peter's up in Division 1B at that stage. Armagh, I remember it said Armagh a few years before it split into like A's and B's in each division. So you had a group of 8 or a league of 8, and you had home and away 14 games. And we actually got off, St. Peter's got off to a really, really good start that year. They actually won the first 5 games of that Division 1B in 2019, and we're sitting top of the league. And then probably like anything, maybe sort of teams sort of caught on to us a wee bit, maybe didn't take it for granted like they maybe had in the first few games, and then sort of the middle part of the season sort of fell apart a wee bit. And then I think with 2 games to go, maybe St. Peter's beat Cullaville to make sure to stay up in the league, you know. So it was a good achievement actually bringing them up and then keeping them up the year after, you know.
Yeah, so at that stage though, you were happy to sort of walk away and leave it at that, because you'd won the league and championship the year before, you got them promoted, you stayed in that division, and I just have wrote down there to myself, looking at that, I would just say job done. Then you were happy and pretty satisfied.
Yeah, well, sort of as I maybe said in the first podcast, I'm not too sure if I did. Sort of in terms of my management, I feel it's sort of 3 years with any team is plenty. You know, the first year you sort of get used to the players, they get used to your training. The second year you maybe have a wee bit of success, and if you manage to get them promoted, then the third year is all about consolidation in the higher division. You know, and certainly I feel like I've great respect for managers like Mickey Hart and Sean Boylan, you know, who were managing their counties there for nearly 20 years in Mickey's case, and I think it was 20 plus. I think it was maybe 23 years. Sean Boylan was with me, you know, because what I find myself after 3 years, the players know you inside out, you know them inside out. Whenever you come to the first training session in pre-season, the players could nearly rate the session themselves, you know, that they've been there that much. So sort of like Ciarán the previous time and Ciarán before that, Brad, I sort of felt 3 years with St. Peter's, and it was sort of the end of the life cycle, you know.
Yeah, and then that obviously opened the door in 2020 to ourselves. So you were a free agent as such, and Clann Banna came knocking on the door. But I can remember, obviously, we'd be in the circles where you're hearing all the crack about the managers, and I think it was somebody in Dad's work had actually mentioned it, or mentioned that you were free to him. So I'm not too sure if that was the initial source of it or what, but if you want to just give us a wee lowdown then on how Clann Banna came to you.
Yeah, as you said, 2019 and I left St. Peter's, so obviously 2020 had nothing really set up. And to be honest, I wasn't really actively looking, you know, for anything. Like I wasn't looking about the clubs in Armagh to see if any clubs were available or any clubs were looking managers. And then, as you said, I think between your dad working with a friend of mine, Darren Livingstone, over in Heister and Craigavon, and I think Paul Malone at that stage, who's actually the assistant manager helping me the last 2 years, I think at that stage he was maybe doing a bit of grounds work up at Pierce Oaks in Armagh, and the caretaker, the groundsman of Pierce Oaks, was actually the father of the fella Paddy Toner I was talking about, and you know, in the first podcast, would have helped me with Ciarán. Mm-hmm. So I think sort of between a combination of your dad and Paul, I think maybe that's in terms of my name, it's maybe how my name maybe came to the attention of the committee in Clann, you know. And then it was Tony Campbell, then Toots, phoned me and was chatting to me and said, will I be interested? And then I said, look, give me a few days, leave it with me. And I went about and did my own research myself, you know, sort of looked at the league tables and looked at the results from the 2019 season, and sort of felt to myself that, you know, traveling wise, it wasn't too far away. It was only 25 minutes away from home. You know, the opportunity to coach in a different county, you know, like whenever you look back at that stage, I'd maybe been coaching senior teams for 13 or 14 years, and I'd never actually gotten a phone call or I'd never actually applied for a job outside of Armagh. So I sort of felt it was a challenge that I'd never experienced before. New teams, new grounds, you know, a new county board set up, new referees, new people who I was going to meet. So I said to myself, why not? And then I ended up at the Clann last year.
Actually, one of my first memories is our first sort of friendly game that we had with Ronan. It actually came up in my Facebook memories today. It's a year since we played Trillick.
That's right.
The windy day up there, and I can't even remember whereabouts it was, somewhere in Vermont.
Up in Urbanstown, yeah,
up on the hill, absolutely foundered.
Yeah.
You know, the bit of bonding we had after, it was great to have. But obviously then COVID sort of wrecked your sort of first year just after the March or so.
Yeah, as you say, it was in around this time last year where we played our first match against Trillick. And then we had a couple of matches after that. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the teams, but I think we had played 3 challenge games before the COVID hit. I just remember last year, our last training session was on the 11th of March, which was over in Focus Gym in Craigavon, where we had been going to once a week with an ex-St. Players, Peter Dara McGowan, owning the gym, you know. And I remember the 11th of March was the last session, and then we didn't get back training again as a collective group until the 24th of June. So it was effectively 3.5 months last year of no collective training, sort of for a manager in his first year with a team, not really knowing the players. It sort of put a massive dent in the preparations, you know, for last season. And really, whenever we got back then on the 24th of June, I think we had like maybe 3 weeks training, you know, before the league started. So we maybe only had about another 9 sessions after we went back. And I think with a couple of challenge games thrown in there as well, you know, to sort of try and get your team ready for that first match of the year against Newry Shamrocks down in Park Esler. So certainly in terms of preparation last year, if it had maybe been year 2 or year 3 of the cycle, it wouldn't have had so much of an effect because you still would have known the players and they would have known the setup of the team and tactics and stuff like that. But really that 3.5 months from March to June last year really put a massive dent in the plans. And it probably wasn't really until in around the championship time where I felt that we were sort of playing anywhere near our full potential. You know, obviously the championship last year, the first round was disappointed where we were well beaten by Drumgaff. And then we managed to sort of regroup and we beat Newry Bosco in the first sort of playoff match. And then that went on to Tullylish in the second playoff match down in Newcastle, which was a good win, which brought us through to the quarter-final. And then again, we were drawn against Bransford. And to be honest, you just have to hold your hands up like Bransford, Drumgaff. Sorry, in the 2 games we played against Drumgaff last year in the championship, like they were the 10 or 11 points better than us than what the scoreline suggests, you know.
Yeah, and then after, obviously you've touched on COVID and there being a delay, when everything got up and running then, Ronan, obviously coming from the leagues in Armagh, to me, it looks like it's so different because you've got your different playing nights, different training nights, different league and championship setup. So in terms of that, even like in terms of the referees, how did you feel everything was in comparison to Armagh then?
Yeah, as you're saying, Brad, obviously I had little to no experience of down football coming in. I maybe watched a few club games, you know, maybe watched Lexa Kilcoo or a couple of senior games over the years, but I really had very little experience. And as you say, something as simple as like whenever I was managing in Armagh, I knew every referee from experience, so I knew what way they were going to ref the games, what they were going to blow, what they weren't going to blow, and obviously that was sort of relayed onto the players before the match. Whereas going into Down last year, didn't know any of the referees at all, and just sort of maybe something that I would have picked up as a major difference between refereeing in Armagh and refereeing in Down. Sort of in Armagh, I feel that the referees would let a lot more go, whereas I felt last year in Down, and again, I'm not saying it was all one way, it was for both teams, you know, playing any particular day. I just sort of felt that the referees gave a lot of what I would classify in Armagh sort of soft freezes. So it was very, very difficult for defenders, I felt last year in Down, if you didn't win the primary possession, to actually defend your man, because it seemed to me if you put a hand on your man at all, the referee was given a free against you. And again, as I said, that's not sour grapes. I'm talking about working both ways, you know, freeze for us and freeze for the opposition. So sort of if I was going in this year now, hopefully whenever we get back and we were playing in-house challenge matches, I would have to, and I would be refereeing the in-house matches between ourselves, similar to what I saw last year in Down, as opposed to maybe what I was doing last year whenever we were doing 8v8s or 6v6s or 15v15s, where I would have let a lot go, you know. So again in the first year, it's a learning curve in terms of a lot of things, Brad, as you say, players, you know, opposition and referees, big time.
Ronan, were you surprised how tough some of the teams were in Division 3? Because you would be thinking in Division 3, you know, team standard sort of goes down. Like we talked about there, we played Newry Shamrocks. So you're thinking about Newry Shamrocks probably would have got promoted if they were in a proper league. Like, and they're really on the rise. What do you think of the standard?
Well, as you said, are you sort of in that Division 3 last year? Obviously, we didn't play every team in Division 3 last year because it was split into the two sections. But certainly, out of the teams that we would have played, obviously, Newry Shamrocks, as you say, who had got to the intermediate final, I think, in 2019. I think they were beaten in that final. Again, would be a good team. And as you say, good young players coming through on the rise. As I've touched on, Drumgaff in the two games we played last year, sort of, as far as I would be concerned, would have to be our benchmark this year in terms of Division 3 if we're looking to compete anywhere near the top half of that league. And again, we played Leitrim in a challenge match a couple of weeks before we played the quarter final, and again, they would be another very strong team. You know, so sort of as you said, the league structure in Down, obviously with the 4 leagues, and then the championship structure, I found that difficult to sort of comprehend last year, you know, because as Brad was saying there with Armagh, the league and the championship are linked. You know, you have 3 leagues, Division 1, which is your senior championship, Division 2, which is your intermediate championship, and then Division 3, which is your junior championship. So I sort of found it a wee bit difficult, and I couldn't really understand or get my head around last year how Saul in Division 2, you know, Dramara from Division 4, and then your crux of Division 3 teams were all in the intermediate championship. You know, to me, that just didn't make sense, where a Division 2 team could be playing a Division 4 team in the first round of a championship. And then again, you go to the flip side of the coin, you've Auckland and Finn there, who were Division 3, but were playing in the junior championship.
Yeah.
You know, so I imagine in Armagh that the numbers work with the clubs. I think there's 49 teams in Armagh, so it sort of works with 2 16s and a 17. You know, so I imagine the league and the championship structure and Down obviously has got something to do with the number of teams that's playing. But I just felt it strange that a Division 2 and a Division 4 team can be in the same championship. You know, it's something again that I sort of have to try and get my head around and prepare for this year, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely different in Armagh. It used to be you had to win the intermediate to get into the senior, and different things you had too, didn't you?
Yeah, it's the same way as that in Armagh. The only 2 ways you can get promoted in the championship is by winning your league or else winning your championship. So if you win a Division 2 league, next year you would be playing in the senior championship. You know, or obviously if you won the intermediate championship next year, you'll be playing in the senior championship as well, you know. But certainly, like I know last year in Down, you know, the championship first round was maybe played. I think the championship, we had maybe like 2 games, or I think with 2 or 3 games, league games, and then the championship kicked in, and it was effectively played off. And then the remainder of the league games, the 2 games, was played after that. So Armagh had tried that for years, and I didn't think it worked. I know Down have looked at it, judging by their plan for this year. Down have looked at it, and I think the plan is this year, all being well, is that Down would run off the league, get the league finished, and then the championship would start, which is basically like 2 seasons, you know. So at least if you're a manager of a team and you're trying to prioritise the championship, you sort of will have an idea of when you want your team to peak, you know.
Yeah, that definitely helped in Down last year with I think you've seen some of the games that you've seen on Port TV and all, like the Down Championship was very, very good last year. It was just teams all going for it. Used to be, you know, teams were never competing really that well, but with some really cracking games. And Bridge had some good games too, especially the game of Tullish, and the Bosco game was nip and tuck in the first half and stuff for a while.
Yeah, as you say, like I think last year there was 4 championship games the Clann had. So, like I remember after we beat Bosco in the first round, Willie Gribben, the chairman, phoning me and saying that he was delighted. You know, because I think he was saying it was maybe the first championship win that the Clann had in maybe like 3 or 4 years, you know. And then whenever we went on to the next round then and beat Tullish and qualified for the quarter final, I think somebody, maybe one of the club men, maybe yourself, maybe said it was the first time that they've been in the quarter final in like 9 or 10 years, you know. Yeah. So in terms of, I know Brad last week asked me, you know, what would be the targets be for this year if if all being well, we get back. So obviously, like the numbers, like we did a few sessions there before Christmas, whenever we were allowed to train non-contact in groups of 15. And the numbers would have been very, very good. Like we would have been averaging probably low to mid 30s at those sessions before Christmas. And like I remember last year, whenever I met the players at the start of the year, I think there was 21 players arrived up to the players meeting away back in, it was actually November 2019, So the numbers have grown from last year. I don't know whether that's to do with myself or whether it's to do with the fact that everybody's squandered in the house and they just want out, But certainly in terms of targets for this year, with the numbers that we have at the minute, I know Brad will testify to this, I would like to think that one very basic target for this year for Clann na Banna would be that we field in every reserve game this year, because we have the players there at the minute, we have the numbers there to be able to field 15 or 18 players every Sunday for a reserve game, So certainly whenever we get back training, that would be something that I would sort of be drilling into the players. You're not going to get better, you're not going to get experience just by training with the seniors. You're going to have to go and play reserves. And then obviously in terms of the league, I think the plan at the minute is a one-way league of 10 games. So again, if you were winning the majority of your games in that league, if you were coming out at the end of the year maybe with 6 or 7 wins out of 10, certainly I would be very happy with the progress there. And then in terms of the championship, a lot, like all championships, is going to depend on the draw whenever it's eventually done. But like last year, we got to the quarterfinals, so you'll be looking again this year at sort of a quarterfinal, sort of your minimum target for a game for this year,
Yeah,
definitely the reserves are getting the lads up to the reserves and feeling and being competitive. Brad will definitely be able to sleep better if we were able to do that.
Well, just to put in, the games are on Saturday, so that's what I mean. I don't think Sundays work for us, but this year, like I say, hopefully it should be good, and you got a slight glimpse that there's 5 or 6 of the younger lads coming up as well, who were coming up from the under 17. So it's always good, and they're 5 or 6 very handy footballers as well. So hopefully they'll not just be a number, and they can hopefully influence you and encourage all the other lads to sort of step it up, because I think that's good as well when there's a challenge for places in the team.
Yeah, as you say, Brad, like even I'll imagine at some stage those young lads will be getting game time on a senior team at some stage during the year, but certainly like those four or five lads who have stepped up from the under 17 team, like their priority should be whatever number of reserve games there is, if there's 8 or 10 reserve games next year, to make sure that, because they all are training, Dara Scullion and Ryan Morgan and Mikey Wood and Callum Burns, those 4 lads have all been training, whenever we did the sessions before Christmas, and any of the work that we're doing at the minute, those 4 lads are sending their stuff in through Strava, so certainly for those 4 lads, it would be so important for them this year that they make themselves available and can play every reserve game, and then whenever they're needed on the senior team, whether that's as a start or whether it's coming on as a sub, that they're able to come on and influence the game,
Yeah, well, I think it's good as well that even there's the slightly older ones like Owen Scullion, Fergal, McNiff, Connell, Quigsy, you know what I mean? There is a good group of young players there in the club, and plus there's a few ones who will not name any names, but they've been about, but just as a bit part. And I think if we all get everybody up, you know what I mean, we could definitely try and do something.
Yeah, as you said, it wasn't actually until I got the players to fill in. Like in my first year, I got them to fill in like sort of a questionnaire, and I never got them to fill in their dates of birth. So I didn't actually know the ages of the players last year. But whenever I came around, for this year, I actually got them to fill in their dates of birth. And the amount of players on that panel who are like under 21, under 22 years of age is something serious. As you said, there is a serious amount of young players there. Like I think Dean Lennon texted me there during the week saying he had messaged Thomas McKay, in terms of how he was getting on, and Thomas McKay texting him back saying, going grand, everything's going well in the Abbey. He's still in school.
Yeah.
And he was playing senior football last year. Like, he played the first 3 or 4 challenge games for me last year, and then hurt his Achilles tendon on his ankle, you know. So like, I would have put Thomas probably at 21 or 22 years of age, but obviously he's only 18, you know.
And as Hod was saying, today sort of marks the year when we played Trillick. We would sort of be classified as a townie club, and I know you've been with Tiernan Oak and St. Peter's of Lurgan, which obviously Lurgan, Portadown, Banbridge were all sort of similar towns. So are you seeing any similarities in like the clubs and the structures and the people around them, or how do you feel that by us and our townie team label?
No, as you say, it obviously is a townie team, you know, and sometimes townie teams will be labelled as having a soft centre, you know. It would be something that we certainly would have to work on this year, you know, obviously, especially with the players, a lot of the players being so young. But then there's lads in the team there who's been about for years. You know, you think of Nelsons, you think of Dean Lennon, you think of Mal McGee, Mickey McAllister. You know, you have strong seasoned players there, you know, who's been about, I'm sure, senior level for 10 plus years, you know. So you do have enough experience there on the team who can sort of look after the younger players whenever it comes to a match day on a Friday. And then, as you said, like, you're maybe sort of touching on like a social aspect there, maybe, in terms of the townie thing. Obviously, in Down with the matches, the senior matches being on Friday night, it's obviously a major help in terms of managing a team. Whereas, you know, the players can still, to a certain extent, have a social life at the weekend after their match on a Friday night. You know, if they want to go out for a meal, or if they want to go out for a drink, or socialise with their friends, or their girlfriends, or their wives on a Saturday night, they can, you know. So certainly, like, I knew, I'm friends with Peter Quinn there. We played for Tully Lish for a long number of years, went to university with them. And I remember sort of always saying and always trying to advocate that the Friday night football, you know, for club level was sort of the way to go, in terms of, you know, players were committing to their Monday, Wednesdays, Fridays, but they still had, to a certain extent, their weekend off to do whatever they wanted on the Saturday and the Sunday, you know. So certainly it would be a major positive in terms of the fixture schedule, that I think, as a club manager and for club players, that Down County Board have had over other county boards, you know, for a long number of years.
Yeah.
Right, well, Ronan, that sort of wraps up Clann Banna, and hopefully this year we get back to football quite soon, and hopefully we give it a good out rattle with the league, because the way the leagues are going to go, there's probably, if it all gets back in time, there's going to be promotion and relegation, so the leagues are definitely going to mean something this year.
That's right, yeah.
And it'd be good to give the championship a good out rattle again, and maybe cause an upset with a bigger team if we end up drawing someone there. So we'll just head in, and the last part of the interview is just, Ronan, I asked you last week to think of your top 15 that you've either managed, played, or coached against, or whatever. You know what I mean? So did you have a think about that then?
Yeah, so sort of, as I was saying this last week before the internet issues, I'm going to tweak this a wee bit, and I'm going to name a best 15. It's actually a best 17, because I've 2 goalkeepers in, and I've 2 right corner forwards in that was sort of coached in America. Because, as I was saying to you last week, I would be still friends with all the Ciarán Oak boys, and I would see them on a daily basis and never might walk on the roads, and I wouldn't want to be knocked down by one of them if I didn't include them in the top 15. So I'm going to try and dodge that bullet and not fall out with anybody. And I'm going to go then for the best 15 that I trained in Boston between 2005, 2015, and 2016. So again, in America, it's actually only 13 a side. You play with 2 full forwards and 2 full backs. But I'm going to go with a 15 a side, or in actual fact a 17 a side, because of, as I say, of 2 double positions here. So in terms of goalkeeper, then I've got Larkin Malloy from Dublin. Larkin was a county under 21. He was a goalkeeper of Wolf Tones in 2015, the year we were beaten in the final by Donegal. 2016. He was the goalkeeper the year we won it in 2016. And then also on goals then is Darren McDonald from Galway. Darren was the goalkeeper in 2015 whenever we were beaten by Donegal. And again, Darren was a great trainer, great athlete. He trained as hard and was as fit as any of the outfield players that year. And I wouldn't actually be surprised if Darren actually plays outfield for his club. You know, he's that fit of a player. So goalkeeper was Larkin Malloy, Dublin, and Darren McDonald from Galway. So going into the full back line then, right corner back, again, I mentioned in the first podcast, was D. Rafferty from Newry Shamrocks. D was out with Armagh Notre Dame in 2005. A brilliant man marker, you know, very, very fast over the ground. Good ball player, never give away a possession. And again, as I mentioned previously, he started in the 2010 All-Ireland final for Dublin. I remember being down at that and sort of disappointed for him that Down didn't win it that day. So right corner back's Damien Rafferty from Down. Full back, he's got good news there on Friday night. Full back is Padraig Faulkner from Cavan. Padraig was out with us in 2015. My Wolf Tones played corner back, would have been doing a man marking job. And watching Cavan this year, he was playing midfield for them. I thought he was absolutely outstanding. You know, between full back and midfield, he was playing. I think actually quite a few of the games he was playing with a rib injury. So Padraig got his just reward there on Friday night, getting an All-Star for 2020.
I think we should probably say you'd actually tipped him in the original one, which didn't get uploaded. You'd actually tipped him to get the All-Star. So we'll just put that on record in case they think you're just adding it in.
Pity I couldn't have got odds and not in the bookies, Brad.
Ronan, did you know he was going to be a great player for Cavan in years to come whenever you coached him?
Yeah, because again, at that age, he probably would have been about 20 or 21 whenever he was out in 2015. And again, the physique he had for a young lad was exceptional. You know, very, very fast. And his attitude to training and his attitude to instructions was brilliant. You know, like, he didn't know me from Adam, but whenever I was explaining to him who he was marking, what foot he kicks off, you know, what he likes to do in the matches, Padraig would have took it all in, tried his best to bring it in. So, like, he was the complete package there in terms of attitude, physique, fitness, and then he also has a wee bit of devilment about him too, which is useful at county level, you know. So with Padraig Faulkner from Cavan in there at fullback, and then at left corner back, again, this is 2016. This is the year Wolf Tones won it. We have Mick O'Grady from Kildare. So Mick is still playing cornerback for Kildare at the minute. And again, sort of a tall player, good man marker, and again was very good at driving forward. You know, whenever he won the ball, he didn't just stop, give it off to somebody else to stop. They always went and supported the play and created overlaps. So again, Mick O'Grady at left cornerback from Kildare is an outstanding player. So moving into the half-back line then, we've got Conor Moyna from Cavan at right half-back. Conor was out in 2015. He would have played centre half-back on that team in 2015. But right half-back, I have him in. I think Conor played for Cavan in 2019 and would have been one of their better players in 2019. But I think he's actually in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or somewhere at the minute. So he wasn't on the Cavan panel this year. So unfortunately, he missed out on his Ulster medal this year. But again, an outstanding player, sort of small, stocky player, you know, great physique, super fit. And again, going back to that 2019 year with Cavan, he would have been very good at, you know, he was nearly worth a point a game or 2 points a game with long range shots off the outside of the boot. So with Conor Moyna from Cavan at right halfback, then centre halfback going back to 2016 again with Kevin O'Brien from Dublin. Kevin O'Brien would have been a Dublin panellist, I assume. I think he's maybe won All-Ireland medal. He could possibly have two as a panellist. He would have played O'Byrne Cup matches for Dublin and maybe a few league games. And I mentioned last week about the famous incident of him biting a player. And I was thinking over the weekend who that player was. I actually think it might have been Dutch Cooper. I'm not 100% certain on that. But again, Kevin O'Brien would have carried a threat for us at centre half back. He would have nullified, like in the final against Galway, he marked Killian O'Sullivan from Meath, you know, the long haired boy with the ponytail from Meath. And again, as I said, I don't know what Kevin said or did to him before throw-in, but Killian O'Sullivan was sort of he was very anonymous in that final, you know. So Kevin O'Brien from Dublin at centre half back, and then at left half back again, going back to 2016 with Andy McDonald from Louth. Andy went out that year as a home-based player. He went out to America before the end of April, which meant he was classified as a home-based player. And you had to play 5 home-based players on every team. 5 of the starters had to be home-based. So Andy would have been, probably in 2016, he would have been the best home-based player in Boston, to be honest. You know, he was absolutely outstanding. And as I mentioned to you last week, in one of the first matches in 2016, maybe mid-April, whatever way he fell on the ground, he actually ended up smashing his head off the sprinkler on the pitch and ended up fracturing his jaw. So the fact that he stayed about from May right through to the end of the summer, you know, says a lot about the man in terms of his character. You know, it would be very easy for him to go home and say, right, the summer's over, I'm not going to play, and just go home and play for his club whenever he got back fit. But the fact that he stayed on for that extra 3.5 months and got himself fit, I remember him, he got like those face masks, you know, that the soccer players would wear whenever they got like a broken jaw or something. They got one of those fitted for him for the quarterfinal, semi-final, and final. So again, Andy McDonald there at left half back from Louth. So going into midfield then, again, 2016, Paddy Keenan from Louth. Paddy got an all-star in 2010. The year Louth, remember the year Louth were robbed in the Leinster final against Meath? Your man threw it over the line, Joe Sheridan. So Paddy Keenan played midfield, and again, I was mentioning Andy McDonald there in terms of his character as a man. I can't say I can repeat the same in relation to Paddy Keenan. Paddy Keenan's father died in that summer of 2016 whenever we were out in America, and Paddy and the wife went home for the funeral and then came back out to Boston about 5 or 6 days later to come back and play in the knockout semi-final and final. And again, Paddy would be one of the best players I've ever trained, you know, and he was at that stage, he was probably about 30 or 31 at that stage. So again, having the fitness levels and the heat in Boston to be competing and getting the better of lads maybe 8 or 9 years younger than you is a credit to Paddy, you know. And then the other midfielder, this was from 2015, is Davy Hyland from Kildare. Again, Davy's still playing for Kildare at the minute. I think he sort of fleets between full back and midfield for Kildare. But again, he was only a young lad then, maybe 21 or 22. Very, very fit, very fast, great engine. Okay, up and down the park, tenacious tackler. And so that completes the midfield. Paddy Keenan from Louth, Davy Hyland from Kildare. So into the half forward line now, number 10, right half forward, I've got Dara McVitie from Cavan. Again, he didn't play for Cavan this year because I think Dara's actually in Australia at the minute. So he wasn't available for Cavan this year, so he lost out on his Ulster medal. But I think in 2019, I think Dara might have actually been the captain of Cavan in 2019. Again, an absolute flying machine, could cover the ground. We played him at number 10 for the first 2 or 3 games. And then for the semi-final, we actually moved him into left half back. And as I said last week, that meant a club man of my own who I had taken out that year, Conor McCormick, lost his position for the semi-final, which I felt was a wee bit unjust because Conor was playing outstanding football that year out in Boston. And then after the semi-final, Dara went home. He had to go home. I think he was a school teacher or something over here, and he had to be home for a certain date. So he missed the final. So it meant Conor then, my club mate Conor, came back in for the final at left half back, and I thought he had actually scored the winning point. In the final, he scored a point to put us 1-up with a couple of minutes left, but Donegal ended up equalising. So if Dara McVitie in there at right half forward from Cavan, and then centre half forward, you'll know this name of Leighton Glynn from Wicklow. Leighton, I think he played in 3 different series for Ireland in the compromise rules. You were mentioning him last week, Pod, about, you know, in those matches being one of the best players there. And as I said last week, Leighton Glynn is without a shadow of a doubt the best player I've ever coached. You know, his organisation, his vision, his scoring, his high catching, you know, even simple things like influencing the referee, absolutely outstanding. So centre half forward, Leighton Glynn from Wicklow. And then left half forward, this is going back to the Armagh Notre Dame team of 2005, Christy Toy from Donegal. Christy's obviously an All-Ireland winner with Donegal with Jim McGuinness there in 2012. And I just remember the first couple of training sessions with Christy, whenever we were doing running drills or whatever, we're doing a wee bit of a warm-up, he just sort of glided over the ground.
Yeah.
And you could tell he was an absolute athlete. You know, in 2005, we had to play Christie in midfield, which obviously wasn't his position, because whenever he was playing for Donegal, he was always a 10 or 12. But an absolutely outstanding player, and again, a good score taker. So the half forward line, Dara McVitie, Calvin, Leighton Glynn, Wicklow, Christy Toy, Donegal. So going into the full forward line now, again, I said last week that I'm going to put two players in at right corner forward. And there'll be two friends of mine and two boys that I took out to Boston the years I went out. So the first one at right corner forward is Paul Carville from Ciarán and Portadown here. I took him out to play for Armagh in 2005. At that stage, he was only 20. He had just come back in the first podcast. I'd mentioned to him about going to play for Preston North End over in England. So he had just come back from Preston, and I took him out for the summer there in 2005. And in terms of a left-footed free taker, you know, obviously I'm probably biased here because I've coached him so much. I've probably coached him for maybe about 8 or 9 years at this stage of my career. Like, he is the best left-footed free taker I've ever seen. Like, whenever he was in his game, any free kick inside the opposition half on his side of the pitch, I was nearly writing down 7 out of 10 he was going to score. You know, like, I'm talking, I've seen him score from the halfway line in the own pitch in Ciarán from a free, you know, a great free taker off the ground.
Ronan, did you notice any difference in him, you know, coming from the soccer into the Gaelic? Was he a bit rusty, or was it just sort of straight in and he was just back to his old self?
Well, he had probably played a wee bit before we went out that summer, Brad. He had probably played a wee bit for the senior team. You know, it wasn't just a case of him getting off the flight from Preston and going straight to Boston. He had done a bit of training with the Ciarán senior team and probably had played a few league games there too. So any sort of ring rust that, you know, it would have been got out of him at that stage. But like, even whenever Paul was over with Preston, like, I don't know how he got away with it, but we were still flying him home. You know, Ciarán were still, not every week, but maybe if we had 15 league games, Paul might have been flown home for 5 of them to play, even though he was in a youth professional contract with Preston, you know. So whenever he went to England, he didn't just, you know, down tools with a club. He would have still been involved. And as I said, the last time, that probably came from his father, Michael, being heavily involved in the club as the treasurer, you know. Mm-hmm. So with Paul Carville, and then also at right corner forward, I have to mention Shea Tennyson from Mahary, who I took out in 2016. Shea went out in 2016 as obviously a player who had never played for Armagh at any level, under or minors or under 21s. And you can hear from the previous names, you know, the sort of players he was competing against. And like, Shea went out, knuckled down, and played outstanding that whole summer. Like, he's maybe averaging 5 or 6 points per game. Again, he was a left-footed free taker, which helped. And coming up towards the semi-final and final, he was actually keeping Tomas O'Connor from Kildare out of the starting team. You know, so it just sort of goes to show that, you know, sometimes a good club player, whenever they're playing amongst good players, are every bit as good as, you know, as some of the county players out. Like, those 3 lads I took out, Conor McCormick, Paul Carville, Shea Tennyson, like, the county players who they were playing with at that stage couldn't believe that they had never played for Armagh, even at underage level, you know. So in terms of the lads I took out, you know, from friends of mine from my own club and from Mahary, you know, they did hold themselves well in the high esteem that they were, in the high quality players that they were with, you know. So with Paul Carville and Shea Tennyson there for right corner forward, both from Armagh, and then full forward with Tomás O'Connor from Kildare. Tomás, very strong. He's nearly put you in mind of a rugby player, the build of him. You know, played corner forward in 2015, would have been a really influential player for Wolf Tones in 2015. I think there was one match, maybe he scored like 3 goals and 5 points or something. He's just a complete battering ram, you know. And then, as I said, 2016 would have been coming on in the latter stages as a sub, you know, whenever Shea or Shawnee Furlong maybe tired a wee bit, and would have been coming on and doing serious damage. So full forward there is Tomás O'Connor from Kildare. And then last but not least, in left corner forward, I've got Shawnee Furlong from Wicklow. Okay, Shawnee, I think at the minute, or certainly last year, was captain of Wicklow senior team. Again, just a natural forward. You know, in terms of physique, wouldn't have been the same sort of physique as some of them other players I've mentioned in terms of, you know, gym freaks and six packs and stuff like that. But Shawnee knew how to get out in front and win the ball. And whenever he won the ball, he knew where it was going. So I actually think in the final in 2016, Shawnee maybe scored 1-7. And I think all of it was from play. So left corner forward, there's Shawnee Furlong. So probably looking through the team there, you know, bar the goalkeeper and Paul Carville, Shea Tennyson at right corner forward, every one of those players would have represented their county with distinction at senior level. You know, I know maybe it's not counties like Dublin or not counties like Kerry or Cork or Tyrone, you know, but as Hod was saying there, boys like Leighton Glynn and Paddy Keenan, you know, if you throw them boys into your Kerrys and into your Dublin, those boys are getting on, you know what I mean? And they're coming away with 2 or 3 All-Irons in their back pockets, you know.
And 2 All-Stars there as well.
Well, whenever I went last week, it was only 1. So with 2 All-Stars now, and I think Leighton Glynn, I think he was nominated maybe 1 year for an All-Star as well, you know. I'm not too sure about Christy Toy, you know, those couple of years, Donegal got the All-Ireland final. He could have been nominated for an All-Star as well. I'm not 100% certain. But yeah, Paddy Keenan and Paul de Faulkner are 2 All-Stars. So Leighton Glynn All-Star nominees. So a decent enough team.
Yeah.
Handy enough.
Just another question there on the whole America thing. Like, did you ever have to put any of the boys in the line? You know, did anybody sort of piss about, and you know, they were just sort of, you know, I'm only out here for a drinking holiday sort of thing? Because like as you said, like the committee members, they would have paid, you know, big money to get them lads flown out and get businesses all sorted in the money, and like they would have wanted results for that there. Was there any like sort of time you had any problems with that?
To be honest, the 3 years I was out, in terms of sort of, as you said, the likes of those players there I'm mentioning at the minute, you know, there was no problems whatsoever. You know, we obviously, like sort of the way we would have worked it out there is if you had a match on a Sunday, you know, Thursday, Friday, Saturday would have been a case of you trained on a Tuesday, on a Thursday, and then you might have met up on a Saturday and went through things, or maybe went to the sea on a Saturday or something like that for a bit of crack. So like really in terms of the training schedule and things like that, it would have been as tough as any sort of good club team. As I said last week, the likes of those teams I would have coached, I would have fancied them playing, you know, your Kilcoos, your Crosses, your Ballindarries, your St. Galls, you know, that's sort of the level I think they would be operating at, you know. So really, it was up to the home-based players. Like, say, for example, with Armagh there in 2005, sort of the enforcer would have been Jerry O'Reilly from Granchico, who was a home-based player. And if anybody was dicking about, it was up to Jerry. He would have went and he would have sorted that out, you know. And then, say, for example, the likes of 2016 with Wolf Tones, you had Paddy Keenan and you had Leighton Glynn, who were probably in their early 30s at that stage, you know, had been there and done it. And it was probably a lot of times, because all the lads lived together, you know, like Paddy Keenan there was living in the same house with Shea Tennyson and and people like Mick O'Grady and boys like that. So there maybe was about 6 or 7 of them living in the same house, you know. So if one person messed about, the other boys knew, you know. And sort of the way it was with a competition for places, if somebody was out drinking on a Friday night and we had a match on a Sunday and you knew that that person was in with a chance of taking your position, you know, the players were sort of felt obligated to tell the management team, you know, sort of like, even though Boston's a big city, like within the football aspect of Boston, like every single person knows every single thing that every other club is doing. You know, as I was saying to you there, I was saying last week about, I've actually remembered the name of the boy now from Roscommon. I remember mentioning about Darren Duffy driving me into the city one day in 2015, and him being on the phone to a fella from Roscommon. He was on the phone from a boy called Donny Shane, and he had a brother for Roscommon as well. I actually Googled Donny's name there. I think he actually retired from Roscommon there at the start of January. So, like, as I say, Boston's a big city, but every single team knows what you're doing. So Darren was on the phone to Donny Shane about getting him and his brother out, and Donny had already told Darren over the phone that Aidan McAnespy's and Donegal had already been on to him. You know, so even though it's a big city, every team, every club member, every committee member knows what every other club is doing and knows probably what every player who's brought out is doing, you know, at any given time. So it's a small bubble that they live in. So really the opportunities for them to mess about were probably few and far between, to be honest, you know.
Otherwise they were going to suffer for it.
Otherwise, well, you see, it used to be years ago, whenever you went out to Boston years ago, if you were given a financial package, if you were given X $1,000, you got that as soon as you arrived, which basically gave you the license to mess about for the season because you got your money, you know. Mm-hmm. But sort of in 2015, 2016, whenever I was out with Wolf Tones, I had nothing to do with the money. But as far as I'm aware, say, for example, just picking random names, say, for example, Shawnee Furlong there from Wicklow, whatever number of $1,000 he was on, he got a proportion of that whenever he arrived, you know, to sort of set him up. And then he was given the remainder of it. He was given the remainder of it whenever the team was knocked out of the championship, which thankfully that year was after the final, you know. So again, the committee members probably learned from previous years, you know, maybe with players that messed about with them, you know, to do that, to sort of stagger their money so that they couldn't just get their big lump sum of money and then go mad and let you down. So again, there's sort of that X over the players in terms of they didn't get their full package until the team was out of the championship, you know.
Yeah, it's definitely a great opportunity for some young lads to go out and play football, and it's great. And hopefully, just with all this COVID stuff, it doesn't sort of, you know, ruin the clubs over there at the minute, you know, with their home-based players. Hopefully, they're still able to keep going. But hopefully, with the vaccine and all these things rolling out, you know, they'll be able to get lads back over to play for these clubs again.
Yeah, well, I know last year, because I was actually talking to Darren Duffy there last year during the summertime, during the midst of it. You know, Darren was the fella, he put me up in his house for 2 summers, you know, and I couldn't speak highly of the fella. Like, I was actually speaking to him there about a week or 10 days ago. You know, like, Darren put me up for 2 summers, him and his wife Susan, and like there was no expense spares, meals, drinks, anything you were out. You know, your bill was, he wouldn't accept me paying half the bill. It was just a case of put your money away, I'm paying for this, you know, you're out for the summer, you know. Yeah. So I had sort of said to him last year, what was the plans for last summer? And they were talking last summer of just running a championship, you know, with the players that were out there living in America, but it never transpired. But certainly in America, like whenever I was out in 2005 with Armagh, there was a senior and an intermediate championship and a junior, you know. So in 2005, you probably had maybe 12 or 13 or 14 clubs in Boston. And then whenever I went out in 2015, you had your senior championship and your junior, which was basically the reserve team of the senior teams. And even whenever I went out again in 2016, there was another couple of teams that folded. So I actually think in Boston at the minute, there's maybe only 5 or 6 teams. You know, you have Wolf Tones, you have McAnespy's, you have Donegal, you've Galway, and you've Connemara Gales. You know, so and like there was a club there called Shannon Blues, who last couple of years I think dropped down to junior. They didn't have a senior team. So certainly, as you said, the big thing with football in America at the minute is nobody's emigrating to America now from Ireland. You know, they're all going to Australia. So the football in Australia is taken off, and the football in America in terms of home-based players and players that live there is beginning to struggle a wee bit, you know.
Yeah, just when you mentioned that, I would have went to school with Shea Miller from Glen, and he would have been in around the county panel. I seen he put up a photo that they were doing the Australian Sevens. So him and a fella, I think it's Chris McGee from Restraver. So it's just funny the way that we're over here, we can't do anything, and the lads are out enjoying themselves playing sevens football.
Yeah, exactly.
Taps.
And then I think last week, man, I'll have to give these boys a mention in case they get the head taken off. Last week, you were sort of mentioning about, you know, sort of players who notable references or notable absentees in terms of the top 15. So again, going back to that top 15 players who were very, very close. And again, great players, Barry Toner from Greenmore and Armagh, who played in 2005, great centre-half forward. Jerry O'Reilly from Crinchico, who was a home-based player with Armagh in 2005. He lived out there. Again, would have been in and around the Armagh panel whenever he came home, played for Jordanstown, Sigerson Cup, played for a few big clubs, St Jude's, I think, down in Dublin. Barry Fortune, who was cornerback on the 2016 team from Cavan Gales, again, a great player and a fella I would keep in contact with every year. He's a great man for me whenever it comes July, August, September times for tips for the Cavan Championship. So I would keep in touch with Barry. He's a good lad. His younger brother, Luke, played in the Cavan team this year. I think Barry was on the panel, but then I think he tore the quad muscle off the bone this year. So I think that's why he wasn't on the Cavan panel this year. So again, he was very unlucky. And then Owen Powderly from Kildare, again, cornerback in 2015, very, very good player, good man marker. And again, another fellow that always wanted to learn, you know, was always asking you about the players he was marking and stuff like that, what feet to kick with. And I remember later on that year, Owen was called into the Kildare panel late 2015, early 2016. And they were playing Cross McLean in a challenge match. And I got this random phone call from a Free State phone number and answered it. And it was Owen on the other side of the phone, and he was explaining to me that they were playing Cross McLean in a challenge match the weekend. It was his first match for Kildare, and he was going to be playing cornerback and looking to know about who the corner forwards were for Cross, and you know what foot to kick with, and do they play sweepers, what do they do, you know. So he was a fellow who was very, very keen to learn and a great lad. And then the last three, probably Donal Nugent from Antrim. Big Donal there would be on social media quite a bit. I think in an interview there with Jerome Quinn over the last few months, Donal would have had issues there with alcohol over the last couple of years. But he's a great hurler as well. He's absolutely flying there for Antrim hurlers at the minute. And I have a good story about Donal. In the 2015 championship final, we were playing Donegal, and Rory Kavanagh. Remember Rory Kavanagh played midfield for Donegal? Donegal over here. He was playing midfield for Donegal Boston, and he was dictating. At that stage, he was maybe 33, 34, and he was dictating the game, you know, dictating the ref, you know, more or less he was reffing the game himself. And we brought Donal on maybe about half time. Shortly after half time, Donal was only 18 at this stage. He had played for St John's in Belfast, and my mate had coached them. That's how I got in contact with Donal. And we brought Donal on to start of the second half, and I hears this almighty thump after about 20 seconds after he comes on, and I sees Rory Kavanagh laying on the ground. And Donal walks over to the sideline, asks for a drink of water, and I says, "Donal, did you just do what I think you did?" And he says to me, "I couldn't have been bothered fucking listening to him anymore. I was sick listening to him in the stand." So big Donal went on, smacked Rory Kavanagh, who was probably twice his age, 10 seconds after coming on. And fair play, then he got away with. And Actually, in that final, he actually scored 2 points in that final. Whenever you sit and look back at it now, he had trained brilliantly for us in the week between the semi-final and the final. And we were thinking, will we start him? But it was going to be a massive risk in terms of throwing an 18-year-old into in the championship final who hadn't really played much football that year. But he came on, as I said, and between the second half and extra time, probably played the guts of 45 minutes and was as good as any player on the pitch. And I'm really delighted for him that he's doing so well with Antrim hurlers there at the minute, And then probably the last three players then would be John Horn from Donegal, would have been out with Armagh in 2005. Again, John played for the county for a long time and played for St Eunan's Letterkenny. I actually think he played for their senior team up until maybe a couple of years ago, whenever he was maybe 39 or 40. I think whenever the last time they won the Donegal Senior Championship, John was playing midfield for them, and he was agey at that stage, So again, a great servant. And then the last two, Paul Murphy from Ballyholland. Again, we've been in around the down panel about 2010. He played centre back in 2005. And I've a wee bit of a gripe about Paul Murphy in terms of the final. Paul played centre half back in that final, and I'm sure if he's listening, I think he actually admitted to my brother years later that he was right. In 2005, in the final, he was playing centre half back, and Mark Little from Fermanagh was playing centre half forward for Aidan McAlinden. And to me, looking back on the match after, I thought Paul got himself involved in a personal battle with Mark Little, where Paul wanted to get the better of him. And every time Paul got the ball, he wanted to drive forward with, wanted to carry the ball. And the amount of times Mark Little just run alongside him and popped it out of his hand, and maybe set up another attack for McAlinden. And I didn't actually tell Paul that, but I think my brother maybe told him a few years later. My brother would have kept in touch with him. And I think Paddy texted me there a couple of years ago saying Paul eventually accepted that I was right and he was wrong. But so Paul Murphy there for Ballyholland and Armagh in 2005. And then again, the last person who I mentioned, again, my own club man there, Conor McCormick, who played left half back in 2015, as I said, was sort of unjustly, I thought, dropped for the semi-final and then came back in for the final and played outstanding. And again, he was a player who the lads he was playing with couldn't understand how he had never played for Armagh. But probably the three things in common with those three boys I brought out, Paul Jarville, Conor McCormick, and Shea Tennyson, was the fact that they were all very, very small. They're all probably 5'7", 5'8". So even though they had the skill set, even though they had the fitness, even though they had the ability, probably in terms of county level, maybe the managers were thinking they didn't have the physique, they didn't have the height, But that's my tuppence worth anyhow for the players I've trained out in Boston.
Hopefully there won't be too many text messages going your way then.
I hope I don't see Paul Murphy in the next couple of weeks.
No, that's a great top 15 and a good few honourable mentions there who, like the likes of Paul Murphy. Paul Murphy's still playing away at Ballyholland, and as far as I know, he'll be playing next year as well. Age is just a number to him, basically. And he was actually one of Ballyholland's best players last year, I think.
Yeah.
A couple of the team of the years, I think maybe on the Load of Balls podcast, he was even mentioned as one of the all-stars, one of their all-stars. And like for a man at 40 years of age to still be bossing about down football and in the senior championship is, fair play to him. Like.
As you say, he always kept himself in tip-top shape. He's always in great shape physically,
Yeah. No, but Brad, you have anything to mention just before we finish up here?
No, I think that's it. Just obviously wish Ronan and the lads the best of luck for next year, and hopefully we're going to bring home some silverware.
Hopefully we want to get out training.
No, but Ronan, thanks very much for coming on the podcast with us. Well, we're trying to get it done in one, but it's now taken two. That's just the way the internet goes sometimes. But yeah, we'll just wish you all the best for the rest of the year, and hopefully we get back on the pitch soon. And I'm sure we'll have you on again. I'm sure we'll do an analysis show about something at some stage later on during the year.
No bother, Hod, 100%. As you say, I hope to see the two of you in person here over the next few weeks. Hopefully, if we get back training.
Yes, no problem. Thanks very much, Ronan.
Okay, thank you.